We have a guest in studio today talking about a pretty remarkable story that he's come across. In fact, it is a huge part of history here in Twin Falls. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're at 35. Bill Cowley with you on Magic Valley this morning. It's been a long time since we've seen Ron Yates in studio, but actually it was one of his last studio visits that spurred the story today. Welcome back, first of all.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much, Bill. It's a pleasure to be in your presence and in the presence of Magic Valley with another history lesson here today.
Yeah, we did this. We did a talk about oh the Stagecoach a couple of years ago, I guess it was.
Yeah, it was in 2016 when it was installed at the Visitor Center,
Yeah,
and I just recently completed a historical book about it. And when it was presented there, I worked up the book so that it answered people's questions.
and suddenly out of nowhere, recently you hear from a guy, well, Massachusetts,
Correct, Massachusetts.
and he says, "Hey, I'm going through the internet doing a search, and I came across this interview because he has discovered the Stagecoach."
Yes, well, the story goes back to about the 1970s, Bill, where the stagecoach was obtained by another person, and the man that telephoned me in January heard our interview, and he can substantiate that he has another Perrine stagecoach, which would be believable because Perrine operated 4 or 5 stagecoaches. I've identified 4 different stagecoaches in my book. And as a result, he sent me some photographs that kind of substantiated his claim, and some of the photographs earlier that he had of it, and it looks to be the same mud coach design that one of Perrine's was. And what was a key is that as he was doing the restoration work and sanding off some of the paint in some of the locations, that the words "I.B. Perrine Proprietor" came through the paint. And that meant it was kind of a mystery at the time. Well, what's this? And at the time, this was in the 80s when he was restoring it. And the internet wasn't really available, and he just knew that this was provenance, but what was it? And so as time went on, he would continue to research. He eventually bought a photograph of one of the Perrine stagecoaches here from in Twin Falls, and that looked like the stagecoach. Well, the lettering wasn't quite there exactly. He couldn't identify the lettering, but what on one of my photographs that's in the book, it's clearly the same stagecoach that he has. Um, there was also another logo on the stagecoach at the time. It was easily recognized as being the Big Hole Stage Company, and that operated in Montana. So the stagecoach has provenance in Montana and Idaho. And when Richard telephoned me and sent me photographs, and I started to do my own little history of it, and I discovered quite a bit about the stagecoach operation in Montana from that point.
I was going to say how it got from one place to another, and it was probably not unusual to sell a Stagecoach, just like someone might sell a used car or a used truck.
Correct.
And so at some point it moves on to Montana, but then from there on, how does it get to Massachusetts?
Well, there's 3 parts of the story. One, we don't know how it got to Idaho because it was built in 1875. Because when Richard was restoring it, a couple of craftsmen have signed their names and dated the stagecoach under the seat, 1875. So it started in Concord, New Hampshire, at the Abbott Downing facility there, where they made world-class vehicles for the day. It arrived in Idaho. At some point, I believe Perrine purchased it in the 1880s or 1890s. He probably sold it about 1912, and it then went across the Continental Divide into the Big Hole country of Montana, which is east and north of Salmon, Idaho, kind of between Salmon, Idaho, and Butte and Dillon in a triangulation. And it ended up there to this Big Hole Stage Company in Wisdom, Montana, and they had an operation that would drive passengers and mail from Wisdom to Divide, Divide was the Oregon Shortline Railroad that went up to Butte. So it was a 43 mile route that required 9 hours of travel. And they had
Without shock absorbers, we should
no
point
shock
out.
absorbers. The mud coach was a kind of a low design, and it swayed on its leather. Um, oh, I can't remember the name for it, but no shock absorbers, but certainly it was, and especially this time of the year in the mud, it would have been difficult. Um, when the coach was there in Wisdom, in 1910, the Big Hole Stage Company was incorporated. It had three partners, and it was June 3rd, 1910. I discovered this on my research, and at the same, let's see. Yeah, let's see. Oh, Charles Miller, Wesley Miller, and John Hertzler. And incorporated this at the same time. Another operation had sold their rolling stock and their mail route, which serviced from Salmon, Idaho to Red Rock Pass to Red Rock, Montana. Different operation, and they had sold all of their rolling stock to another Wisdom stage company. So there were two competitors again, and that stage company that other one operated until at least 1924 is what I found the last entry for. And when Richard said to me that this stage was probably the last, he was told that this is the last operating stagecoach in the state of Montana. That's more provenance for the historical aspect of it, and that would have been probably 1924.
So nearly a 50-year lifespan that this thing was in service.
Correct. And interestingly enough, a few hours after I spoke with Richard on the telephone, I went online and made a search for Big Hole Stage Company just to see. And darned if I didn't find a picture postcard of it as it was set up in Billings, Montana, as sort of as a local icon. And there's a picture postcard from the late 1920s of this same stagecoach that he sent me photographs of, only 60 years earlier. And so as I do my research, I try to prove that it didn't happen. And as I'm proven wrong, and he's proven right, we're coming up with the conclusion that this is a Perrine stagecoach, and it also had other provenance as well. Well, Richard wants to sell this stagecoach, and this comes to where it's really interesting to me, because our Perrine stagecoach here was coincidentally restored at the same time Richard was doing his in the early 1980s. And when the man, Johnny Myers, who passed away, and our centennial celebration for Twin Falls in 2004 was kind of winding down, his widow sold the stagecoach to a Texas collector. Within a week, there was a tremendous uproar and news stories about we're going to lose this icon that no one really considered as being an icon until that time, till it was almost gone. And three local men stepped forward and matched the same price of $45,000 to the Texan that the Texan had put up. And I think it was Mike McBride, Randy Florence, and let's see, Richard Stivers put up that same money, and it went into storage until it was restored again and put on display. Well, the same thing as Richard is thinking here, well, maybe somebody wants this locally. Maybe somebody wants it in Montana. And would you put the word out? Because I'm going to take it to an auction service in Montana later this spring or summer. And so, and he's quite interested in history. And so I'm doing this kind of out of, I feel it's my duty to get the word out. And I've introduced the idea to a lot of historical associations and 5 different businesses. And buyer beware, I want to ride in the stagecoach. That's my commission. So, at any rate, with all this happening, we almost lost the first stagecoach in 2004, and quite a bit more money was put into his restoration over and above the $45,000 purchase price, and special windows installed in the visitor center so they wouldn't fade. So there's a lot of money invested in preserving the icon. Without this icon, without that stagecoach, Perrine probably would not have had the same success, because he had that initial business that brought people to the area, which he then was able to attract those wealthy people as investors in the irrigation project.
I want to mention Ron Yates is joining us in the studio, and the historian has worked with a man in Massachusetts to track down one of the Perrine stagecoaches, and yes, it could come back. Telephone number, if you'd like to reach us today, is 208-736-0300. We're at 34, coming up on 816, and Bill Colley with you, too, on News Radio 1310 KLIX and Magic Valley this morning. This obviously it's going to be a little bit more expensive than 45,000, but a number of factors really are pretty much the same here. The restoration's already been done.
Correct.
So, you factor that into the cost. Number two, 15 years later, there's a little inflationary pressure that goes into this.
Very much.
So that neighborhood probably of $80,000 for this coach is just about right when you consider what was paid 15 years ago.
Yes, historically, I did some work with some auction houses and a couple of people who handle these rolling stock, these type of buggies and wagons and stagecoaches, and the price somewhat peaked many years ago. It used to be an Abbott Downing stagecoach would come across an auction block, and the opening bid would be nearly $100,000. And the interest has waned a bit, and also collection of this type of thing takes a little bit of thought, and then you have to invest money in a place to display it and things like that. So it's an investment. Well, you can probably buy a similar stagecoach for $35,000. It's a remanufactured one, or it needs to be worked on if you just want to have one. But this one has provenance in Idaho that we can prove, in Montana that we can prove, and that means a lot to a collector. So the price, and it's also roadworthy. This Perrine stagecoach we have on display, it'll roll. But if you want to drag it behind horses at this point, it's probably not a suggested thing. And Richards is going to be roadworthy. And so yes, your comparison, Bill, is good in that the price is it should be at the market level there.
And in rolling too, this is something that we could see in Western days. They could take it out, and it could they could bring it down the street. So you could have 100,000 people seeing this thing. Finding space for it though too. We have limited, I guess, space in the area. We don't have unlike Boise, which has a big shiny new state museum. We don't necessarily have anything like that. But frankly, if somebody just had a particular corner of a large atrium, it could be done, I would assume.
Certainly, and you were describing a business near Mountain Home that has a stagecoach on display earlier before the show, and I want to give you an example. I contacted the Nampa Snake River Stampede, and they've had a stagecoach since the 1948 or 49. They weren't sure which year, but that operated between Murphy and Silver Springs in the 1800s, and they received that as a donation for promotional purposes that year, 49, let's say. It has been in operation without any repair since 1949. Well, they just took it, they raised $60,000 to have it completely restored by a man in South Dakota. And it's going to be back in the promotion business and back on parade service and back making people smile very soon for that $60,000 investment. But let's look at how well this was built initially.
Yeah.
From 1880 to 2018, this coach hasn't had any repair, not much. So, incredibly well crafted these vehicles were at the time.
Can you stick around for a few more minutes, because I want to delve into this a little bit more as far as to how where it could end up, and how we might go about piquing someone's interest in it, at least on the local level. But I've got a short break coming up. Ron Yates joining us in the studio. It's 36. We're coming up on 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley as well on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. You're listening to Magic Valley This Morning. Ron Yates is joining us in studio this morning, 8:22. And by the way, if you want to help out by writing a check to bring the stagecoach to Twin Falls, he'd be more than willing to chat with you. Bill Colley, too, on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're at 33, and you're listening to Magic Valley This Morning. Telephone number 208-736-0300. These things can be done, and we were just talking off air. I've been invited by the curator or the director to the museums over in Deer Lodge in Montana, and they continually expand because they hit on a fundraising formula a couple of years ago that's bringing money in left and right. Those are the type of people we'd be competing against at an auction for this type of thing.
Correct.
And you've got the State Museum in Boise might even have an interest in it. And in fact, the Montana Museum in Helena. So you've got all these competitors, and both states have an interest in it. But still, to bring it to Twin Falls or Jerome would be it's another one of those reasons that we could use to attract people to come here. And those tourist dollars are important. But it's also important, I think, too, to be able to point to the school children and say, that's how your great grandparents lived. That's how they got around. And so, you can't undersell that importance to all of this.
That's true. The interactive experience that museums are using these days is really important, especially for children and adults at the same time, because they can it's one thing to try to visualize what this was like, but actually enter a coach like this or enter something on display and move about in it, or work with it, instructs so much more than just simply standing there and looking at a static object.
Right, right.
You might remember when you were a child, you go to a museum and you'd push this newfangled button, and the recording would come on and tell you what you're seeing, in the diorama. Well, now a lot of museums are working to where you're hands-on, so that you understand the item more so.
We've got a caller with us, and caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Lee Alderson, and I'll pull that stage with my team when he gets it ready.
Well, that's another thing, Bill, that I didn't mention. The first thing I did is
got a pair of Suffolk punching horses, draft horses. They're a very rare breed. There's only 2,500 of them left in the whole world.
Wow.
I'm right here in Hollister.
Okay.
There's a museum in his neck of the woods, too, where this might fit.
Yeah.
Right off of 93.
There's oh yeah, that's true. One of the things I did is I contacted the Horse and Mule Association here locally, and
Right.
I asked them, would this be something that you would pull in parades if somebody were to purchase it? Would you be able to just work with the owner? And the answer was affirmative, yes, because, and there would be somewhat of a competition to be the one to pull it, because everyone would want to pull this. It would be quite an honor to do that.
Right. I want to thank Lee for bringing that up, too, because if you're the person, my dad many years ago had an very old Buick convertible, and he ended up being the parade guy in my hometown because he could drive around the Dairy Princess or any other local celebrity in the parade, and he would drive, and it was a thrill for him to do it. But he's the guy everyone turned to, and if you got a team of horses, it's an honor to be doing something like this.
Yes, and the Perrine Stagecoach that's on display presently, when Johnny Myers had it restored, there was a team or two that would pull it locally, and that made that interactive experience at Stricker Ranch, at the I-Farm in Jerome, and different locations around that really made the memories for people.
We got another caller. A caller, you're up next at 826 on KLIX with Ron Yates.
Yeah, this is Lee Alderson again. Have him get a hold of me after the show, and we can make some connections on all this stuff. And me and Eric Lee have pulled the other one with his Belgian horses there.
Well, then I want to thank him again. We've got someone who will be pulling it. We just need to get someone to buy it.
That's right.
Right. Again, thank you, sir, for the input too. When obviously it's going to come down to a few things have to be met here, but in order to raise the money, it doesn't have to be one person writing a check for $80,000. It can be a lot of people with small contributions adding up.
That would be the case. If I look at it as a business plan, if you were to discover a function for the Stagecoach and sort of keep it busy, keep it working for the community, make a plan that way, and then also make when that's conceived, then you pitch the idea, and then you look for the money, and it could come in small amounts, but then the plan has to continue to grow with the future, essentially. It'd be one thing, for example, I pitched it to the Sun Valley Company because they have stables, sleigh rides, horse rides, and that kind of a thing. It would work well for them. Whether it reach their model or not, they have a business model that they have to adhere to. So when people look into it and have an interest in the Stagecoach, they're looking to what the end gain is. And so I think if we had a purpose for it, it could be co-opted by the 3 county fairs. It could be Lincoln County, Jerome County, Twin Falls County, even I wouldn't say Cassia County, but it could be co-opted and shared by entities. But if you establish that business plan for its use, and then say, and this is what it's cost, and this is what we'll do with that, people come in for $10, $20, $50, and perhaps some businesses would kick in more money. I would contribute money myself for this, depending on my budget But at the price at $80,000, that's a tremendous amount of money. Um, However, you just have to look at the business end of it and go from there.
We've got a caller. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Oh, sorry, it sounds like we're getting outer space there. Well, I'll tell you what, since there's interest in this from callers, we've got a break coming up in about a minute. If you can stick around for the next segment too,
Sure.
because I think that if nothing else, I think this is one of those things everybody wants here. It's just a matter now of finding out how to get it, and putting a few heads together. I think we might get there because we shared off air. We were talking, and I said, children even collecting pennies. Every little bit will help. When we had the restoration of the Statue of Liberty, that's how that worked.
Oh.
School children put money into that, and so if we could just, there's got to be a lot of ways to do this, and there's got to be a team effort, obviously.
Obviously, yeah.
We got more coming up with Ron Yates in just a moment. It's 8:30, almost 8:30. We're at 33 on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Of course, some grant writer out there, too, might not necessarily be a bad choice either. We just have to find the right people.
Correct.
We've got more coming up in just a moment. Historian Ron Yates in the studio with us, and we're at 8:34. It's 34. And Bill Colley on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And we're talking about an old stagecoach that could be reunited, an old Perrine stagecoach, if we could figure out a way to pay for it and bring it to Twin Falls. And it's a part of the history, of course, of the community in the area. Telephone number, if you'd like to reach the program today, is 208-736-0300, 208-736-0300. Off air, you were referencing the fact that the actual item is so much better than looking at a picture of it online.
Correct. It's when you experience something in person, it gives you a thrill. It gives you a presence, a scale that you can walk up to and say, look at how tall these wheels are. For example, the railroad train that came into Shoshone and Gooding 2 years ago, the main driver rails were over 6 feet tall and probably weighed a ton each. And so this gives a person a lot of scale, and an up close encounter with something like this. One of the things that you have to remember about how this stagecoach operated, if it traveled from Shoshone to Shoshone Falls and then across the ferry, which is across the river, and up the north side grade, now let's just remember how it is to drive down to Durkee's Lake or down to the falls now. Imagine doing that with a stagecoach. Well, things like that could be reenacted at this day and age, where if you had a team of 4 horses on a paved road, you could go down the north side. You couldn't cross the river anymore there, but you could go up either one of the 4 grades on the Shoshone side, on the other side of the canyon from Shoshone Falls, or down in the Blue Lakes Country Club. So excursions like this could be used as a fundraiser or just simply a photo op. A lot of different things.
Think about wedding parties,
Correct.
that would like to use it for a photo op, or
Yes.
a lot of young people before they go to a prom, they might want to be photographed with it. People might want to, for a family issue, just a gift. They might want to get a portrait taken in Western gear with this. All of this would be available.
Something like that's already taking place in Jackson Hole, Bill, where you can have a stagecoach ride from one end of town to the other end of town for a low fee, about the same cost as seeing a movie. And you can have photo ops. Several years ago, I was at Niagara Falls for the second time. I've been there a couple of times, and you could take the ride to the base of the falls and have your photo taken. And people just when they go on tour for their vacation or something, they've budgeted this money to spend so that they enjoy it and they take in the sights and they do these things. So something like this could be incorporated into their plan to come to Twin Falls. They're on the way to Yellowstone from California. They would stop in here to ride the stagecoach, that type of a thing. So someone could make a purchase of this and employ this during the good weather, and offer rides and have an income, definitely. You could start at the visitor center and take the tour all the way down to the bike trails down at Niagara Falls. That's quite a trip, about 4 miles. So I'm not the one to do that. I don't have the horse sense. I don't have the horse sense. I have the imagination, and then if you put the imagination together with a person with a real business plan that can pencil it out and say this will pay, and this will do our community good, well, let's look at it again.
I wouldn't be
So
able to do this either. I just driving a Jeep up and down the side of the canyon was enough for me, and that to be able to try to maintain my sanity on a stagecoach. But some people have better constitutions and nerves of steel. They could do that, and it wouldn't be an issue for them.
yeah, you have to take the handheld devices away from everybody. I don't think they'd be turning them on. I think they'd be gripping something tightly inside the coach and looking out the window.
Well, we've got about a minute to go. If people have an interest in this and helping out, because as we say, there'd have to be a big fundraising effort. What should they do?
Well, the way Richard's looking at this is he wants to make a one sale kind of a deal, and I could be the man on the ground here. If a particular person wants to work a plan to create the money, he can work with me and then put him in touch with Richard, and then they can make a purchase. Um, but if somebody really wants to do that type of work, they can telephone me, and I can kind of be the go-between briefly until they can work directly with Richard. So I can be contacted. I'm still in the telephone book of all things. Under Ron Yates, the telephone number is 208-736-0870. And that's probably the best way to contact me.
Yeah, I think you're among the last people I know with a landline.
Yeah.
But you know what? They're a lot more reliable and frequently than what we're using
Well,
today.
my business depends on it, so that's why I have it. Yeah.
I have a friend who's still doubling. He's got both.
Uh,
But he tells me, he said the reason he did it because he said everyone he talks to via cell phone, he said the sound quality just isn't what it should be. And he
mm.
said on the landline, you still could actually hear the other person without a lot. Can you repeat that? So uh, he probably hasn't realized it just might be his hearing. But we want to thank you for coming by
Well,
today.
thank you too, Bill.
Keep us posted because I think that the closer we get to this, there might be some good news coming along.
I certainly hope so, and I look forward to participating and helping wherever I can.
All right. I want to thank Ron Yates for coming by. It's not getting any better temperature wise. It's 35. We're about 20 minutes away from 9 o'clock on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Magic Valley this morning with Bill Colley.